The one thing that was peppered generously in Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's maiden budget speech was the focus on the 5 trillion economy goal, the stated ambition of this Modi government of 5 trillion economy by 2024-25. And of course, that is not possible without a focus on infrastructure. I have with me Piyush Naidu from a partner at Deloitte, who is an expert on infrastructure and the investments therein. Piyush, what did you make of the budget and whether there were enough structural reforms there in order to achieve the stated goal of 5 trillion economy by 2024-25?
See, I think the focus on infrastructure was very heartening. I think right from the first few minutes, it started talking about the requirement to get investments in infrastructure. But if you decode and if you go line by line, I think one of the first lines of the finance minister's statement was that this government in the previous tenure focused on last mile delivery, which helped them. I think it's the last mile delivery of the infrastructure investments, 100 lakh crores in the next 5 years. That is going to be key. So if you look at how various segments were mentioned in aviation, she talked about the opportunity in leasing and the jobs therein, about MRO. In railways, it was about public-private partnership schemes for various initiatives.
The disinvestment
In Air India.
in aviation and in insurance and in media. So
Right.
so a lot on the cards really. But there were no concrete numbers so far.
Yeah.
I mean, at least we've not seen them so far till we read out the budget speech in totality. Have you been able to have a look at it?
No, so I'm just saying that in terms of various initiatives mentioned, there are ideas that were kind of disclosed during the course of the speech. I think what was not done was providing a overall view of how that implementation will happen. I think a lot was left to various sector-specific roadmaps that will be laid out. She specifically talked about the national highways putting out an entire grid
Yes.
of where they will take the development. She talked about regional airports and therefore the aviation ministry coming out with that roadmap. She talked about a power grid, a water grid. So I think a lot has been left to individual ministries to
So what
lay
you're
out
saying
in
is
terms of the
what
program.
you're saying that she laid out the vision statement of this
Yes,
government as
yes.
far as infrastructure is concerned.
Yes.
And now over the course of the next 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, maybe we will see it all being implemented in a bit by bit approach.
Yeah.
Is that
So that's the key in terms of where the investments. I think the couple of issues that she did tackle in terms of structural issues impacting infrastructure growth is land and finances. So on land, there was a statement that land pooling between central and state government agencies will enable large infrastructure projects to be delivered, also affordable housing. I think the devil is again in the detail and on-ground implementation, because there are so many agencies on those land parcels that it's not just an intent that flows through. So it's an urban development authority, it's a transportation authority. All of them have their own
whether
pulls
these
and pressures
bottlenecks
on the ground.
but on the other hand, the mandate that this government has come with, if anybody is suited enough to do this
Sure,
and get
sure.
away with it, is this particular
Sure.
government.
I think you're absolutely right on that, and I think one of the things that can implement that can help the implementation is empowering the actual ground level agencies. So she talked about mass transport. So if you look at the rapid rail transportation system between Delhi and Meerut, the RRTS entity that is going to be implementing it needs to be empowered to deal with these intercoordination issues at the ground level for the land parcels. On the financing, again, I think she did spend a lot of time about deepening of the corporate market, deepening about of the various investments that need to come in, and also getting the global financial system, the value chain integration. I think again, these have been discussed and debated for a fair amount of time.
But now we actually want to see it happening on the
we
ground,
need to
and
see
you
it
feel
happening.
that the roadmap to that was not really laid out in this budget speech.
It was again left to a committee to kind of study and opine in detail, especially on the development financial institutions and their role.
Right.
So I think that's again one of the issues. I would also mention that infrastructure sector today is also in need of some amount of redress, in the sense that private sector players potentially they bid aggressively, but they are in places where the dispute resolution is still stuck. Sometimes they're looking for risk allocations to be tweaked in the models of private and public participation. So those need to be renewed or at least reviewed and addressed, so that the international investors have the confidence to enter. So if you look at it from an international investor's perspective, they need two things. One, the existing projects are running well. Second,
Right.
there is a roadmap that the projects will continue to happen in a certain way.
And both are in a state of a limbo right now.
So
because
both
the
need to be
existing-
addressed. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we heard enough on the intent in terms of addressing both. Possibly the ground level ministries, each of the ministries will have to roll out their programs and also transparently put it out and address the existing issues with private participation.
How do you feel that? Do you believe that in the last 5 years, what has been the growth as far as infrastructure is concerned? Were you satisfied? Is the sector, is the speed of growth in the infrastructure sector commensurate with the intent that Modi government 1.0 had laid out? Because
So
that
on
might give us a sense of where this 2.0 vision is headed.
honestly speaking, I think we are playing catch up in terms of infrastructure deficit overall for the country, and in fact, even in terms of our stated objectives and where we have gotten to. The reasons are many. I think one is the reason of the financial resources being commensurately available to the private sector, and the private sector being in a good shape to participate.
Right.
Today, the environment is not such where private sector is aggressively coming forward and participating in these projects. The second issue is also of ground level implementation. So, railway station modernization was talked about in today's speech as well. This program was launched some time back, and it has gone through multiple amount of reiterations, and again, it's in the place where it needs to be relaunched. So, I think at the ground level, when you look at implementation and how various agencies and even a single ministry comes together to actually make that program happen, there is still a slip between the lip and the cup, and I think that is continuing to show in the infrastructure deficit and the catch up that we are playing.
The cess on fuel
Right.
for road and for the road network and infrastructure. How much do you think that is a step in the right direction?
So I think she had to look at resources for all the programs, right? There were a lot of programs, initiatives mentioned, and this is one avenue that's seen because of softening of crude prices, as she mentioned.
Right.
If you look at the impact on logistics, there's certainly an impact. So it's not to take away anything on the impact. I'm not sure how the balance would balance overall. We'll have to see the numbers. So possibly it was just an effort to kind of balance the numbers.
The role of foreign investment, Piyush, and then that is another key area that
Yeah.
you already talked about. But I would like to just go into it in a little more detail in terms of global and foreign investment in the sector over the last 5 years versus what you expect in the coming 5 years, given the various disinvestment schemes that she's talked about and the opening up of FDI, etc., in various sectors concerned.
So I think the scope is huge. I think we are looking at new technology. So for example, in railways, we're looking at high-speed railways where international investors
monorail,
and technology players have a huge role.
Yeah.
We are looking at, in aviation, 40 of our airports will get congested in the next 10-15 years, so much that we'll have to immediately expand capacity. The requirement of a few lakh crores essentially again. So there is huge scope for foreign investors. They have the wherewithal. They are also backed by pension funds in their respective geographies to be able to put in long-term capital. I think what's critical is to again give them the confidence that they have Indian players they can work with, their partners who are financially sound and have some amount of ability to manage things on the ground. And there is a system or a contractual structure in place where they will get their due and not get stuck in terms of
Red tape
regulatory determinations
Yeah.
itself. It's a fairly regulated sector,
Exactly.
infrastructure. So that is key to give them the incentive to come and invest.
As far as this government is concerned, given the mandate that they've come with, one of the key areas, and actually the only thing taking the sheen off them is the slowing growth.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that they will be obviously hard pressed to kind of address that pain point on an immediate basis. What are the immediate steps you think that the government should take to ease the foreign investors wanting to come into the Indian infrastructure sector? What is it that the government can immediately do? A few steps, if you could nudge them in the right direction.
So, from an infrastructure perspective, I think it is the bogey of projects getting stuck that is very scary to international investors. So, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Any amount of projects that are stuck because of contractual issues, because of financing issues, also arbitration with government authorities, that needs to be addressed on priority. So that investors in general, domestic and international, both have the confidence that the government intends for these projects to move forward. So I think that's one key signal that they intend to move. The second signal is the roadmaps that she talked about. As soon as we put out a roadmap for each of these sectors for the next 5-10 years, saying these are the projects we'll do at this periodicity, people can plan around that. They have
Right.
visibility that it's not a one-off, there is a cycle of projects to follow.
Right. So going forward, you feel that is exactly where the government should be headed, and those are the first few baby steps that they should be taking if they are to achieve their stated ambition of reaching the $5 trillion economy by 2024-25. And we'll keep coming back to you with more updates. Thank you, Piyush Naidu, for your time.
Thank you.
And keep watching LiveMint.com.